Welcome, Veteran Nation fans. We're live this morning. Let me try to get us a little bit better centered here. I was playing around with everything just before we went live, so there, that's a little bit better. And so, what I want to talk about today is I'm seeing a lot of misconceptions out there about classified material. What's classified? How are things declassified? And as for those of you who watch the show, you know that I worked inside a SCIF, a secured compartmentalized facility, and I dealt with top secret materials every single day. Uh, so we're going to go through a couple misconceptions, and then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about what's going on with Trump and all this. So first, I'll start off with how things, what's classified and how it becomes classified and declassified. So the the United States Congress has passed a series of laws for every division of the government. And if that division has anything to do with the national security of the United States, then it is generally given power to classify and declassify materials. And there are three types of classification. There's declassified or no classification. There is secret, and there's top secret. Now, some of that information can be what they call compartmentalized. So just because someone has a top secret clearance doesn't mean they get access to all of the government's information. What they do is they compartmentalize it. So sometimes that's done by the organization. Sometimes it can even go down as far as section. For an example, I worked in the United States Liaison Office at an embassy, the USLO as we called it. So we could compartmentalize stuff within our own section, which meant that only people within our section could read that material, and it would be deemed to be, for needed use only. Meaning, I couldn't show it to someone who worked in the security or the attaché's office unless they had a need to know. Now, if they had the proper security and a need to know, I can show them whatever documents I would need to be able to show them for them to do their job. Need to know is very important. It's one of the things that's most highly investigated, because some people, there's a lot of rules. It gets very confusing as to the different things that you can do with classified material, and that's where all this comes into play. Sorry, I'm just going to move some things around on my desktop. So if people want to jump in here and ask me questions, I will be taking your questions through YouTube, obviously. So compartmentalized, it's considered spillage if you show it to someone else who's not within your compartment, who doesn't have a need to know. But normally the damage is considered contained, so they'll do an investigation. Someone might get in trouble, but it's normally not a serious thing. Now, if you show classified information, like if you showed some top secret material to someone who has a secret clearance, that is against the law, and it can do significant damage to the United States. That's why we have these things. Now, there's other things that you'll see. For instance, if it's a declassified or no classified document, then it can also be compartmentalized in terms of it can be for official use only. And this is where you get into groups like Department of Education, HUD, things like that. It's not going to do any damage to national security, but it could do damage to the organization. It could put them up for any type of legal jeopardy. So that's why it's for official use only. You can still get in trouble as a government employee showing it to somebody, but you're not going to be as in trouble as if it were a classified document. But as far as I know, HUD, Secretary, or the Department of Education, they don't have anything to do with classified material, because there's nothing in terms of damage to national security that those organizations could do. I could be wrong. Maybe there's a section of them where they could do that type of damage. I would imagine it's if they're working with military schools, things along those lines. But it's not a common thing. So That's why we have classification. And what's being debated about right now is how are these things classified. Now there is a document out there that that they use. Now each organization, like I said, they have their own founding laws and whatnot, and they normally get the powers divested to them by Congress that says, hey, you can classify materials. But that they rarely ever tell them, here's what needs to be classified. That comes from executive order, and I'm going to show you that right here. So this is the executive order. This is the most current one. It gets changed from time to time. This one was signed during the Obama administration. It's classified national security information. It's Executive Order 13526. And as you can see, it was signed December 29th of 2009. And as you go through here, it establishes, as I just said, the very basic things for what classification is. It also gives the authorities. Now, here's what's important right now. This section right now. The authority to classify information originally may be exercised only by the president and the vice president, agency heads and officials by the president, so they're designated by the president, and United States government officials delegated the authority pursuant to the paragraph of this section. So the most important thing to take away from this is that the president and the vice president have ultimate authority. They are the ones who determine what's classified and what's not classified. And then, as you can see through the rest of it here, it's got military plans, weapon systems, operations. Going down a little bit, we got scientific and technological, advancements that deemed important for national security. Duration. Things are not classified for perpetuity. They are generally deemed to be, hey, after X amount of years, these are no longer that important. So then they get declassified. And as you can see, there's a couple time frames here that really do come into play. And by that I mean, you see right here, 10 years. That's a general one. You'll also see 3 years for some. But then there's up to 25 years. Those are kind of your standard ones. Whoever is classifying the document, most times they're going to fall under those categories unless there's a specific discussion about certain things. And I've had some of these discussions when I was in Afghanistan. When you are and this is another thing I want to bring up. When you classify something, it's the onus on the originator to give it the classification. And that originator says, okay, I feel that this is classified because of the things that I know, and it needs to remain classified until X day. And that's how this works. I'll get into some of these things, but there are prohibits and limitations. As you can see, this is ultimately where this all comes. Now, here, the Freedom of Information Act, the Presidential Act, and the Privacy Act. These are very, very important. And I'll give you some examples as to why. For the Privacy Act, I just realized my logo is over my face, so let me bring my face up a little bit here, and so that way you guys can see me. So the Privacy Act and the Freedom of Information Act, those are things that I talk about quite a bit. These are very important documents because they really do allow us as freedoms, and it really defines our freedoms. We have a right to privacy. We also have a right to information. No one has a bigger right to information than the American people, and that's what Congress has said under the Freedom of Information Act. I do FOIAs all the time. And I'm going to be doing some videos on how to do a FOIA and why you should do a FOIA. Information that the government has should be available to everyone unless it's going to damage the United States national security. And that's what we say. But with that is also privacy. So certain people have privacy. And this is where the government really does mess up. Sometimes you'll get these people who say, well, for instance, with the current thing, they're saying that the agents in the search warrant have privacy and their names should be redacted. Yeah, but the problem is they're public officials. They're there in a public capacity, so you and I have a right to know who those officials are. Now, in this case, Trump or anyone working for him, they maintain a level of privacy. So their information is what should be redacted. Uh, Also, the Presidential Records Act. That one I'm going to talk about here as well, because that's another one where the president has ultimate authority. It's a constitutional authority under his executive powers, and Congress, through these acts, has affirmed that. There has to be someone who is ultimately responsible, and it's going to be the president. That's what Congress has deemed. If Congress was going to keep all this, it would be, well, which one's in, who is responsible for this, and then you get the finger pointing. That's why the president's ultimately responsible. Now, I'm just going through some of this stuff. It says authority for declassification, and see section 2 right there, B2, the originator's current successor in function, if that individual has original classification authority. So remember, I told you the originator has the responsibility to classify that individual after it goes through the processes set forth by this EO or the orders that those organizations have been given authority by this EO. That's who does it. So a lot of times, if information is going to be declassified, what happens is it goes to a foreign disclosure official, a foreign disclosure officer, and that individual then gets to say, okay, they're going to go through and they're going to say, here's how I view the damage to national security if this document's made public. Okay, and then they give their thoughts, and then it goes back to the originator or the person who's in that originator's job, and they say, here's how I've determined the damage, yes or no. It's up to you to ultimately declassify this, and the originator is the last one to sign their name. But again, remember, I told you, the president is ultimate authority. The president can classify and declassify at their pleasure. If the president decided tomorrow that all Walmart receipts are vital to national security and they're all going to be classified, guess what? They're all classified. He has that authority. That's obviously a very ridiculous example, but you know, we are running into these questions where we have to realize that, you know, these questions are going to come up. Automatic declassification. Remember, I told you we were talking about the years. When it hits those years, if nothing else has been done, those get automatically declassified at that time. Excuse me one moment. My cat wants in my room. I'm going to let him in. Okay, I'm back. So the cat is probably going to jump up here and want to make an appearance as well, so just be ready for that. So systematic declassification review, that's, you know, it talks about the National Archives. Again, that falls under the Presidential Records Act and the National Archives and Records Act, NARA. Yeah, and those right here. 44 U.S. Code 2203 if you want to look into that stuff. Now, the archivists, they have authority to downgrade, declassify things. This is all the administrative processes. So, you know, like former government personnel. For instance, in the case of Trump, he's a former government personnel. These were records that he did. If he's doing anything that is required of those records, he has access to them under this section right here. Now, one thing I do want to get into, because this is, as we get down here, this is a lot into the weeds. The president, as I said, has ultimate authority, but that authority is not limited. You didn't see anything in here that said the president has to, right here, where it doesn't say that the president has to, the authority to classify information may be exercised only by president and vice president. There's no limitation there. He does not have to go through a process. And in the past, this has been brought up, it was brought up during Trump's administration. The president can classify or declassify anything through act. Remember, this is an executive order. So this is what he deems these are his orders. So he can go against his executive orders and say, "Yeah, I know I wrote this down, but I don't agree with that." Sorry, the cat is absolutely making an appearance here. Get down. So there is no process that the president has to go through. He can simply state that no, these are classified, or these are classified, or these are unclassified. He can do that by statement. He can do it by an act. Trump physically gave a classified document to a foreign diplomat. He was perfectly legal in doing that because he's the one who decides what's classified and not classified. In that moment, he decided that it was to the benefit of the United States that foreign diplomat get that document, and it wouldn't significantly hurt national security. It's well within his authority. That's what we vote on. So we have given the president that authority, and knowing that these are the rules. So that's how that goes. And with the Presidential Records Act, that's also coming into play. That too gives the president ultimate authority. So the president is the one who deems what is a National Archive material. What things are going to go to National Archives. The president determines it. He also gets to determine what is a presidential personal record, because you have your personal records, you also have your government records. Normally personal records are things like the government records are, hey, here's the decision I made on this thing. This is the EO. This is the official documents that we're going to do. The personal records are these are the documents that the president was given to make that decision. In many cases, it can also be things like his personal calendar. Sometimes those are going to be deemed, if they're official meetings, those are going to be put onto the National Archives. Here's who the president met with and at what time. But then, if the, First Lady comes in and sits down for a meeting, that might be deemed, for 20 minutes, that might be deemed a personal record. And the president has the authority to determine which one is which. It's not determined by the National Archivist or anything like that. No one has the authority over the president on these matters per Congress. Congress has affirmed this. So there's a lot of people saying that no, Trump had to go through processes. He really didn't. He didn't have to do anything. And the National Archives jumping in, they really they're subordinate to Trump as well. So, and I'm going to go back to what happened on January 20th of 2000. So now we're getting into the Trump things. Those documents were taken by President Trump to Mar-a-Lago. Now, normally what happens is a lot of this stuff it's all used up until the day of inauguration. It's all put into boxes and it's all in staging at the White House, normally sitting on loading docks and stuff like that. What happens is then when the president goes to the inauguration, all this stuff goes on a truck and it's all moved. They do all the pomp and circumstance and the here I'm just going to switch to where it's just me. They do all the pomp and circumstance. They actually do the oath, and at that's the transfer of power. But all the stuff that happened up until then was the responsibility of the outgoing president. Now, in Trump's case, he did not attend the inauguration. There's CNN videos. In fact, let me see if I can find one. There's a CNN video out there of Trump leaving the White House, and it's time-stamped at 8:15 in the morning. I'm going to try to find that, and we can actually watch this. Okay. So, screen cap.
Outdated IT tools that don't keep up can make it feel like everything is against.
Okay, we got an ad. There we go.
Saying goodbye. Is that
so right here.
Talking to reporters?
This is Trump, and as you can see, right up here at 8:13 a.m., January 20th of 2000 or 2020. That is Trump leaving the White House, which meant his staff, everything, they're packing everything up, it's leaving, it's done. And by the time of the oath, all his staff, everybody has to be out. That's the way it is, except for those who remain at the pleasure of the president. The president's butler, and people who are going to stay beyond the uh, people who are going to stay beyond the president's administration into the next administration. So there we have it, time stamped. He's leaving on Marine One. He's going to Air Force One. He's taking all the documents with him. That is what went on. So Trump can literally say, by that act alone, those documents were declassified. He can literally say it, that I declassified them via act. He didn't have to say, he didn't have to write anything down, didn't have to go through any process. Just by putting those documents order those to be put onto a plane, that he was determining them to be presidential record or personal records, and that they are declassified. That is all he needed to do in that aspect. So that is what's happening with the crux of this. This is why all these government agencies and all these people saying, no, he couldn't declassify, they're wrong. They're 100% wrong, because he had ultimate authority and didn't even have to tell anybody. He can just say, I thought it in my head, and there you go. Again, ultimate authority. That's what he had. Now, there's a couple things that people are saying. The most recent one I saw that people say is that, well, Biden reclassified the documents. Here's why that is wrong. There is literally no such thing as reclassification of a document. Once it's declassified, it's declassified. And here's the reason. Because once the document's declassified, it's assumed to be in the public domain at that point. Now, the public domain means it's publicly available. So we don't know what Trump did while he was on the flight. While he was on that flight, he could have picked up a piece of paper, snapped a photo of it, and sent it to someone. Perfectly legal, because at that point, according to Trump, it was declassified via presidential act. So it can't be contained at that point. Whatever damage that was done to the national security, if that's what your argument is, it's already done at that point. It's already done. So you're not going to get anything new out of that. So that's why reclassification is literally not a thing. And that's why whenever there's things of classification materials that are either not classified correctly, which is a major problem within our government, or not classified at all, that's why they're a problem. That's why when Hillary Clinton removed the classification markings, that was an illegal act. We have the emails where she told Huma Abedin, remove the classification markings and resend. What that was a way to take a classified document, share it without acknowledging that it's a classified document. And actually, it's a way to subvert U.S. law of, no, it's already been marked, everyone knows it's classified, and you're saying remove the marking so that no one knows. So it's more along the lines of conspiracy. Again, do you hold someone... exactly, Becky. Becky just wrote, can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. That is 100%. That's exactly the way it's considered. That once it's out there, it's done. You just have to deal with the ramifications of it. That's why people like Daniel Ellsberg giving the Pentagon Papers up is a big deal, because they were classified, but once they got out into the public domain, doesn't matter that they're classified. They're in the public domain now. Now everybody can share them legally. Only the person who initially put them out there can really be legally held culpable. So once it's shared, it's shared. That's the way it is. So that's the way it goes in terms of, you hear people say reclassification. Absolutely not a thing. It's done at that point. Now, with most times of classified documentation, these are kind of like the nuances I really want to get into. You can have a whole document. So, I've got my little book here, and the whole document is unclassified, but on the last page, I'm going to put a picture that I know to be secret. I put that in there. Guess what? That whole document now becomes secret because of that one thing. These are what they call situational things. I used to deal with in the military. We would deal with troop movements. Troop movements are not classified information. And I used to go round and round with my executive officer about this. He kept telling me, "You're posting classified information." And I was like, "Sir, investigate me." And the investigator will tell you I am absolutely not. There are things in the military that meet classification levels. So I used to fly Marines back and forth from Afghanistan, all the places I was, at and doing, right? So we would get what they call a unit line number. That's the funding authority that the military uses that says, okay, this person or this group, we are designating the money to send them to the U.S. I can give you the names and that number that is completely unclassified. That's fine. Now, those people are going to go on flights, and the flight's going to have a flight number, so I can give you the names and the flight number. Send that to you. That is unclassified. I can also say this unit line number and this flight are going together. That's unclassified. But the moment I create a document with all three of those things in there together, it's immediately classified secret, and I can't give that up. So that's where my XO would get frustrated. I'd send him, "Hey, here are the Marines, here's the flight." And he'd be like, "That's classified." I'm like, "No, it's not. No, it is not." And we would argue, and it would always go to my boss, and he'd be like, "Yeah, Lieutenant Arthur is right. That is not classified information. If you telling my XO, if you forward that to someone, you add in the UL line number, you're now guilty of putting it in that email chain and making that email chain classified." So there were always these discussions, and this is why it's such a problem, is because it becomes very nuanced. Here's another example of something that people will tell you is classified that's not. If I go into a top secret briefing, and I've got my notebook there, and this is a classified briefing, and you show me a full whiteboard with all this stuff, and I copy it exactly, people will say my notebook is not classified. It is not. It is not unless the information directly itself is classified. Because you can make, again, hey, all this stuff out there is classified, the brief is classified, but my notes are technically not. Even if I take a sketch of, hey, here's what this thing says, or this is what the picture shows, doesn't make any of that stuff classified. And I've dealt with instances where there are investigations on stuff like that, and a lot of times, if it's your personal notes, it's not going to be classified because one, it doesn't raise to the authority. Two, there's a whole thing about access. That's why these things are always talked about and debated. Now, the other thing that we should talk about, people are like, Trump couldn't have classified information at Mar-a-Lago. That's not necessarily true as well. And I'm going to talk about this because I would venture to believe, knowing that the way these organizations operate, that is 100% false. And here's why. Because Trump is authorized Secret Service protection. The Secret Service, they're allowed to maintain an office at his residences. So they have an office at Mar-a-Lago. The Secret Service absolutely deals with classified information. So I guarantee you, when Trump became president and became aware he was going to go to Mar-a-Lago frequently, that they created an office, and inside that office they created what they known as a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized facility. I used to work in one. Now, what that states is there's certain regulations that SCIF has to have for security. It can be as simple as a safe that meets certain requirements, and inside that safe there's, because it has to be double locked. So that safe is going to count as one lock, and then maybe the next thing is, then it goes into this lockbox that's put inside the safe. That's considered double locked. Perfectly reasonable way to store classified material. And there are people who say you can't store classified material outside of a government office. That is false as well. We transfer classified material all the time. And people have to sometimes stay in hotel rooms. I tweeted out that I had an S2 officer. That's our intelligence officer. When we traveled to Afghanistan, we were going through civilian airports. He had a briefcase that was double locked, and he had uh, uh, secret and top secret materials within that briefcase. It happens. Generally, that person has to be armed or have an armed guard, but the Secret Service is absolutely armed and they've got security on the facility. I would venture to say that Trump's vaults or safe within Mar-a-Lago probably met the requirements as well of what the government expects for a SCIF, a secured compartmentalized facility. When I worked in a SCIF, we had a lot of protocols. Okay, I would come in. Now I'd have to show my badge coming into the embassy. That doesn't count. That does not count. Uh, the Marines would wave me in. I'd take the elevator up. Normally, when I got off the elevator, there would be the ambassador, because he was always coming out and checking his civilian um, uh, phone for text messages and emails. Like, he was getting those frequently from family, from White House staff, from Department of State staff. Uh, that was a normal use, but you can't take your phone into the secure compartmentalized security. So you have to leave your phone out. So I'd leave my phone out. I would type in the code to my office, go in. Now, in that hallway was all of the secured areas, but that still didn't meet the requirements. What met the requirement was to go into my office, the USLO. I had to type another key code in to get into that door. Now that was the secure compartmentalized facility, and even within there, we had a vault for VTCs. So I had a door that would close, and I could do a video conference with. I did them frequently with CENTCOM. We did them with. I'm trying to think the other groups. I did one with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff. So we would do these video conferences within there, but it was even more secure. For my computer, I had my what we would call unclassified computer, which is where I did most of my work. But I also had next to me a secret or a top secret workstation. Now, that workstation could be secret or top secret. It actually had a thing where I could physically pull out the hard drive. So it was secret or top secret depending upon what hard drive I in there, and they were very clearly marked. Different colors also had on there what we were using. And every night I had to pull out, if I had used my classified computer, I had to pull out whatever hard drive I was using, put it into the safe, and then close the safe. And I mean, that safe was a pretty hefty safe. But I had to do that every night. Also, we had a secret communications equipment that if you were on duty, you had to take that with you. But we had backups as well. That was also with you. Now, again, it was secret and top secret stuff, but you still could take it with you because you were on duty. You had to keep it on you 24/7. You couldn't let someone else have access to it. You were the sole ones who had access to that stuff. And out there, I have an iPhone. There were certain phones out there that were approved, and you could get a key fob that would go onto your key fob. And if you wanted to check your classified email, you would go into a program, look at your key fob, and say, okay, today's security code is that. It was two-factor identification. You'd put that in, boom, unlocked. Now I can read all my classified emails. So a lot of things that people are saying are just completely not true. There's a lot of misunderstandings. Even within the organizations, there's misunderstandings. So I'm kind of starting to wrap this up, but if you guys have any questions on this, I'm happy to answer for you, because I know there's a lot of confusion out there. But ultimately, the people saying that Trump's going to, lose anything over this, I really don't see it. He had ultimate authority. I didn't see any, major laws being broken. People saying you can't store stuff. They're wrong. We do it every single day. So that's what I have. You can always feel free. You can message me. I am on Twitter. Yeah, I'm probably going to get hit up with a lot of things later, Becky. But I appreciate your comments today. Yeah, feel free to message me on Twitter. I'll be monitoring at VetNationHost on Twitter. You can also follow me at VetNationShow on Instagram. I'll be on there, and I'm at Veteran Nation on TruthSocial. So if you want to shoot me a question or a DM or anything, my DMs are open. Feel free, and I'll answer any questions. But yeah, I'm just trying to end a lot of the misconceptions. Hope this clears everything up for everybody. Thank you for joining me, and as always, thank you for being worth serving.